we're gonna make some butt fall.
Hello, fellow netizens, and welcome to Scandalous Games, the show where we take a closer look at video game-related controversies. I'm Kevin Impellizeri, and I do the research and share a story of a video game-related controversy to my friends.
I'm Kate. I've been writing software for over 10 years, but not the fun kind.
I'm Ryan Weaver. I just sit here and make wisecracks.
And I'm Jay Brandstetter, and I've had a very busy week because we are recording this the week that Chuck Norris died, and I'm an internet historian, so you better believe I've had to put together a Chuck Norris facts episode over the past couple days.
Man.
I gotta watch that.
It has been really interesting seeing the discourse about that online. On the one hand, you have like millennials throwing out Chuck Norris jokes, and you have other people on the internet like, he kind of sucks. We shouldn't be doing this for Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
No, we should for him. We should not do it for Steven Seagal.
Oh, man. Oh, I can't wait for the jokes when Steven Seagal eventually sheds off this mortal coil.
Yeah, like at least Chuck Norris actually did do martial arts. He was an accomplished martial artist. You can't take that away from him.
Yes.
Steven Seagal has movies now where he is sitting down the entire time.
As far as we know, Chuck Norris did not get put in a headlock and poop himself.
Yes.
As far as we know.
My favorite Steven Seagal story, yeah. He was like with a martial artist and he claimed that he was immune to headlocks. And so a guy put him into a headlock and he passed out and he pooped himself.
Yeah, I think like the only actual like good Steven Seagal line I know of, is, even though it's kind of ironic, is like one where it's like, I'm going to take you to the bank. The blood bank. And I'm just like, every time I think of that, I just laugh because like, God, that is such a perfect like 90s one-liner.
I've seen a movie where he had a whole fight scene sitting in a chair. he's just doing like his little.
And I'm pretty sure he's one of those guys like a Vin Diesel or a Rock type where he has to win every fight too.
Oh yeah. They have people complained in Fortnite because the Rock there's like a thing where there's like a battle thing going on right now. And one team is the Rock's team, and people keep complaining that they're inflating the numbers so that the Rock always wins. Because it's in his contract to not lose.
Yeah. I guess also to kind of tie the Rock and this podcast subject together. Do you remember like the PS2 generation when they had that a spy hunter game with the Rock's likeness because they were going to make a movie with him and it never happened. So we just have this weird video game starring the Rock with an orphan project, I guess.
Oh, I didn't even know about that. I've heard of that game, but I didn't know the Rock had anything.
Yeah, me either. All right, so we got Jay Brandstetter here again from the great podcast I'm From the Internet. Jay, do you want to remind people what your show is about? I mean, I'm assuming people listened to the first episode of this, but in case they haven't.
Of course, yeah. My podcast is called I'm From the Internet. I co-host it with a comedian and game designer named Winslow Dumaine. He just had a pretty good Kickstarter for his card game, The Restless, go out. I just got my copy of it. I'm in it as a card, which is pretty neat. But yeah, the I'm From the Internet is internet history, mostly narrative focused. And we do have a lot of game focused episodes because, yeah, video games are very tied in with the history of the internet.
And again, very appropriate having you on. Jay shared in the chat the game Spy Hunter. I've never heard of Spy Hunter. Nowhere to Run. I've heard of the one that was just called Spy Hunter, but
yeah, that's one I'm familiar with too.
But yeah, so we have you on. I figured it was appropriate to have someone who's focused a lot on, the history of the young internet and things like that, to have this figure in video games who is a rather infamous figure in internet gamer culture. One that Jake recently did a fun two-parter on, Mr. Jack Thompson. Particularly, we're talking about in these episodes Jack Thompson's specific feud against Rockstar Games, Rockstar North, Take-Two Interactive. Basically, the people behind games like the Grand Theft Auto series, Manhunt, and Bully. And last time we ran through a bunch of Jack's legal fights against various games, ending with him attempting to get an advance copy of the game Bully, unsuccessfully doing that in court. And then, just having a right proper freak out over that and sending out a bunch of very entertaining to read messages to various personal enemies of his, including the judge who ruled against him, Blank Rome, which is a Philadelphia-based law firm that was the representation for Rockstar and Take-Two, and various other peoples who get into his crosshairs. So we're going to continue with it today. And as I set up last time, we're going to a very distinctive shift in Jack Thompson's moral crusade against video games, because up to this point, he has been on the offensive. He has been the plaintiff for a lot of these cases. But after we get through the bully fight, we're going to see him on the receiving end of some legal battles. He now becomes a defendant in some of his cases. So we ended on talking about Bully last time, his fight over that game. And with that in mind, let's skip ahead to March of 2007. And at this point, Take-Two is ramping up for the release of 2 new titles that were all but guaranteed to attract some attention from folks like Jack. Those were Manhunt 2 and Grand Theft Auto 4. Now, I'll go around the room. Does anyone have any experiences or familiarity with either Manhunt 2 or GTA 4?
I've played a lot of GTA 4. This guy always wanted to go bowling. That's all I remember.
I think that was the one that I played the most, and the only thing I remember about Manhunt 2 was it made a little bit of, I think this is the one, made a little bit of a stir because it came out for the Wii as well as for other platforms, and everyone was like, you're actually going to be doing the murder motions.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never played Manhunt 2, but I always remember kind of my exposure to it was someone did an edit of the trailers. Because like for the Wii, they would have those trailers where it's like families and kids happily swinging along play with the edit. So instead of clips of like Wii Sports, it's the clips from from Manhunt 2. So it's like the kid swings and you see him like smash a hammer into someone's head. And I remember being like, okay, this is pretty funny. I get it.
That's pretty good.
And it reminds me also, I'll just post the link. There was a video on YouTube. Someone did Hostel, like a video game adaptation of the movie Hostel for the Wii. It's kind of someone that like,
For the Wii.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah, I've done a bunch of research into Manhunt 2. We will cover Manhunt 2 in a future episode. It does have a really fascinating history, but most of it has surprisingly little to do with its subject matter. Like, this one's a really interesting game in terms of where Rockstar and Take-Two were as companies, where the state of the Wii was, and the state of like this game. It also reveals like a lot of interesting stuff about the fight over game ratings and what things are allowed to be in games. Without spoiling too much, Manhunt 2 had a long battle to actually get certification in the UK. And that actually might have influenced the way that games are rated in the UK. That's a fun story. The only thing I'll say about it is Dave Grossman, the self-proclaimed killologist, who we've talked about a lot on the show as being like one of these influential figures and was probably the guy who set Jack in this direction in the first place. He wrote a book in 2016 called Assassination Generation, which is just basically like a long screed against violent video games. And he talks about Manhunt 2. And he came up, I think, with what he thought was a very fun, very clever term for Manhunt 2. He called it Wii Murder.
Wii Murder.
I've played a little bit of Manhunt 2. I got the Wii version a while back, mostly for research for the show. But I remember playing GT4 a bit, and I never really liked that pivot towards like more realistic controls for the cars. The cars handle, in my opinion, like a lot more stiff in 4 than they were in like, San Andreas and 3.
I did like the realistic part of that where like a car can stop running and not be on fire. Because the fun thing to do with that was because that was like, it was like pre-GTA Online, where you could play online, but you were just in the city with nothing to do with other people driving around.
Oh, I didn't know there was an online component for 4.
Yeah, I used to play it all the time. You would just it would just drop you into the city, and like you'd pick like a generic character to play as, and you'd run around with friends or other people. And so a fun thing that I used to do, everybody steal a car and go to the airport, and you do a demolition derby. Smash into each other till the car doesn't run anymore. And you could do that in that one because they would stop running and it wouldn't explode.
I remember there was also the game where like if you hit something hard enough, you would fly through the windshield glass too.
Yes. Yes, that would happen.
Yeah, I definitely had a similar experience with GTA 4 where it's like, yeah, between like the jump in fidelity and that stuff, it was very novel to just drive around and experience things. But like once the novelty of that wore off, I was kind of like, oh man, this is a lot of like meeting people at cafes to have conversations. Like it was a weird point where it's like they wanted to be more serious and grounded, but also they still make a Grand Theft Auto game. So it's just kind of in a weird spot for me. Like if anything, I think it's kind of more interesting now as a historical relic. Like it came out before smartphones were really a thing. So like you still have like you pay for ringtones in that game. It's such an odd relic of its time.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and I think that's what it inspired. We talked about this at the end of our last episode. I think that was a little bit what inspired me to pivot over to Saints Row 2, because I think Saints Row 2 was still more of what I was looking for. Because, 4 got very gritty and like more serious, and meanwhile, Saints Row 2 is all like bright colors and like we're having like game modes where you can run around streaking or you drive around in a waste disposal truck and like spray shit on people, and just like two different philosophies for these games.
You just run down the street and do a wrestling move to somebody.
Yeah.
For no reason.
I like that had the insurance fraud mini game where they would make the physics all ragdoll, and you could make your character fall in front of cars and get hit, and so they would just fly in the air.
Yeah, and you get more money no matter how many things you hit.
You get the Meet Joe Black treatment.
So yeah, these are the two games that are coming up right now, is Manhunt 2 and GTA 4, and it's a pretty safe bet leading up to this release. Jack's going to do something. He did this for Bully. He's obviously going to do it for Manhunt 2. He's obviously going to do it for GTA 4. He's going to make some sort of legal challenge like he did for Bully. And leading up to their anticipated release, Take-Two was clearly eager to head Thompson's bullshit off at the pass. On March the 13th, 2007, Take-Two preemptively sued Jack to bar him from suing to block the sale of either Manhunt 2 or Grand Theft Auto 4. It's like, you can't sue me, Jack. I'm suing you first.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just sticking your arm out before the cat can even try and go for the bull. It's like, nope, don't even try.
Yeah. The suit also called upon Jack to pay the company's legal expenses if he lost. So basically, like, they tried to put a financial penalty on Jack effectively wasting everyone's time. And Jack, now for the first time in his career, a defendant in a lawsuit involving the video game industry, took Take-Two's suit as a wake-up call. He reflected on his numerous defeats in the courts and decided to take the high road this time, putting out a statement that he would not waste the court's time with another failed legal battle, and promised that despite his objection to Manhunt 2 or GTA 4's anticipated content, he would not pose any legal challenges.
We all remember this, yes.
Yeah, that sounds like him. He's a reasonable guy. He's not going to do anything outlandish.
Episode over, right? We're all just...
That will do it
Yeah.
for today's episode.
We're just going to talk about GTA multiplayer for the rest of the hour.
Yeah. It's that meme that people have about like movies where it's like the multi-panel, we do this thing that just immediately goes to the credits. Yeah, so Jack, I mean, I think you know where this gag is going. Yeah, he absolutely did not do that. To hear Jack tell it, Take-Two had finally played into his hand, giving him the means by which he could eradicate them once and for all.
Just what I wanted you to do.
I just picture him at a desk going, excellent.
You have no idea what we're getting involved in. You really don't. You have no clue what we're doing. As he explained in a press release following the filing, delivered with a malicious glee reminiscent of a comic book supervillain. I will defer to our guest on this one, Jay. I think you're going to have fun with this one.
All right, supervillain. I can do this.
So it's a little long, but I feel like this is worth it.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm used to reading long passages for my show. So here we go. All right. Dear gamers and gamer publications on the internet and elsewhere, I have been praying, literally, that Take-Two and its lawyers would do something so stupid, so arrogant, so dumb, even dumber than what they have to date done, that such a misstep would enable me to destroy Take-Two. With the filing of the slap lawsuit last week, my prayers are finally answered. This lawsuit, filed in U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida, is without a doubt the single dumbest thing I have ever seen any lawyers do in my 30 years of practicing law, while in continuous good standing to do so with the Florida bar, I might add, the shock radio and video game industry's efforts notwithstanding. I encourage folks to read Psalm 35, a Psalm of David, which is brilliant in its entirety, since God himself wrote it. But for those who don't own a Bible or who think their hands will catch on fire if they touch one, here is the salient portion that applies to this lawsuit. For those without cause have they hid for me with their net in a pit, which without cause they have digged for my soul. Let destruction come upon him at unawares, and let his net that he hath hid catch himself into that very destruction. Let him fall. And my soul shall be joyful in the Lord. It shall rejoice in his salvation. The pit Take-Two is dug for itself will be patently clear next week when I strike back. Oh, and by the way, the entire Take-Two management and board will be gone on March 23rd. So this pit digging comes at a very bad time indeed. Amen, and praise be to God Almighty, maker of heaven, earth, and yes, the maker of even video games. Jack Thompson. I believe he then said, P.S. This is actionable when it did to sign off all those threats. Jesus Christ.
Was there a minimum word count he had to get to with this? Gotta get some good Bible verses in there.
Good Lord.
This'll get him.
It was already in my clipboard. May as well use it.
It's like an inspirational poster in front of him. He finally was able to have an excuse to use it. You know, like a cat hanging in front of him. Let his net that he had hid catch himself. So what do we think about this?
Even for him, this is pretty unhinged. Yeah.
Yeah, he's gone off the deep end there.
Yeah.
But Take-Two finally did what he wanted. He clearly was playing some sort of 8D chess where he actually all these years he was goading Rockstar into suing him so that then he could have the means to destroy them.
Yeah, I think he's what the gamers would call a glass cannon. Yeah, he's so used to attacking, he has no defense at all.
Either that or it's a rope-a-dope. He's taking all these losses so they can set up for this one, you know?
It's going to be his big win.
Yeah. And what he's referencing there is the fact that Take-Two there were a lot of issues going on at Take-Two as a company, and they did clean house at their board of directors. Their CEO got fired. A bunch of their board members got fired. We'll cover it when we do the Manhunt 2 episodes, but there were a lot of things that had happened at Rockstar. None of it had to do with Jack. A bunch of it did have to do with the hot coffee incident because it did cost them a whole bunch of money. And there were a bunch of these other costly things. I know the CEO at one point was being investigated for stock fraud. And the SEC, there were numerous investigations into Take-Two. So, there were a number of things that were getting the shareholders upset, and they did clean house in 2007. So it's more like he's kind of salt in the wound on that. I don't think Jack had anything to do with it. But going back to Take-Two suing Jack. On March the 21st, 2007, Jack countersued Take-Two, delivering what I can best describe as a 37-page manifesto against the makers of Grand Theft Auto, Bully, and Manhunt. In it, Jack denied he wanted advanced copies of Rockstar games so he could restrict parts he didn't like. Rather, he argued that in suing him, Take-Two was violating his right to report a crime, accusing the company of attempting to sell violent and sexually explicit material to minors. More than that, Jack crafted a narrative of himself as a lone crusader battling evil corporations conspiring to bully him into silence. This included lying in the courts to get him kicked off cases, leveraging their powerful political connections to ruin him, and even making parody characters designed to defame his good name and attract harassment from gamers. So let's talk about that one for a second. So as an example of this, in the lawsuit, he mentioned the game Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories. Are we familiar with that one for the PSP?
Yeah, and it got a PS2 port as well.
I've not played that one, but I've heard of it.
So in Liberty City Stories, there is a fictitious anti-internet organization called Citizens United Negating Technology for Life and People's Safety. I'll leave it up to you to spell out what that spells.
That's a very Postal 2 organization name.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put in the chat because again, Citizens United Negating Technology for Life and People's Safety. And there were a series of in-game radio advertisements for this group. And one of them involved a young boy talking to his parents. He's like, what's this naked man doing in your bedroom? He's like, this is Jack. I met him on the internet. And Thompson took that as that was, they were making fun of him.
That's like there's this internet person, I'm not going to reveal, but Kevin, you know who I'm talking about, who at one point claimed that they were featured on this podcast, this video podcast, by which they meant the podcast hosts played a TikTok clip that was entirely unrelated, had nothing to do with this internet personality. But when that video ended, two "You Might Like This" popped up, and one of them featured that person. They didn't say anything. They were like, "Oh, this person, let's watch that next," or any. No, that was it. So it's like
it just was on the screen for a second.
Yeah, and they even looked it over. I thought you were going to say there's some, like, this is Tack Johnson. He loves video games. Now let's run him over or something like that, in the game.
This might seem like a reach, but you got to remember that he'd already sued the show 24 for ripping off his life story with Jack Bauer. He's the only Jack before him. So
this is like when he was suing Neil Rogers, the shock jock in Florida back in the 80s. He revealed at one point that he had been recording like he would just sit there every day and record hours upon hours of Neil Rogers' show. And he claimed he had hundreds of hours saved and that he was documenting every moment where they mentioned him or made implicit mentions to him. And he tried to claim that they needed to pay him $100 every time they mentioned Jack's name. And so he was entitled to thousands upon thousands of dollars. It was who has the time to just sit there all day and listen to, radio shock jocks every day because they might mention me?
Sounds like he just wanted to listen to Neil Rogers, honestly.
Yeah. he's playing in 100% every Grand Theft Auto game because he hates them that much.
I'll show you.
He planted GTA
every
5.
Collectible.
Yeah.
Once I get Bigfoot, I'm going to blow this thing wide open.
Yeah. I got every single hidden package. They make a message about me. So he put this in his lawsuit. He accused Take-Two and their alleged confederates without proof of, heinous crimes like fraud and racketeering, witness tampering, perjury, obstruction of justice, actual accusations of actual crimes. which I'm not a lawyer, but that's basically defamation. If there is no proof that that is happening, then you are legally defaming somebody, which will come back on Jack. And even worse, according to Thompson, Rockstar's mercenaries at Blank Rome, their lawyers, had the audacity to show up to his home to notify him of the lawsuit, according to Jack deliberately and maliciously disrupting his wife, who at the time was recovering from cancer treatment, and prompting Jack to declare, and this one's a short one if anyone wants to read this one, because it's fun to read these things from Jack.
I can do it. This company is run by a bunch of men who apparently get satisfaction from pixelated sex and who do not understand the concept of being a gentleman. I feel like those things are not necessarily related.
No.
The gentleman pixel appreciator.
Sure.
That sounds like a great name for a podcast, Gentlemen Pixel Appreciators.
Never puts the lid back on the peanut butter, and he forgot to take the trash out.
Let's toilet seat up.
It's like a no ma'am type group,
Towel on the bed.
Yeah. So yeah, he goes on to these all things. I mean, the thing about Jack Thompson is like he is like an extremely unreliable narrator, and he kind of leaves out the parts where, for example, he's constantly harassing these people, sending countless messages to them. Again, we'll go back to that in a minute. He also saw Take-Two's actions against him as part of a larger conspiracy involving Blank Rome's buddies in the Bush administration, who he constantly accuses that Blank Rome is using George W. Bush and Dick Cheney to wreck my life. So Blank Rome is involved with this conspiracy, gaming news outlets like Kotaku and GameSpot and IGN, countless harassing gamers who were mean to him online, as well as the Entertainment Software Ratings Board. And he claimed that they were all working together in a nefarious plot to peddle smut to children and silence the only man brave enough to stand up for our kids. In typical Jack fashion, it also didn't take long for his following to devolve into a frenzy of childish name-calling. He called Rockstar Games, quote, morally challenged cultural Neanderthals, end quote. And, quote, Scottish sociopaths sipping their single malt Glenlivet in between brainstorming software programming sessions, end quote.
He only knew one thing about Scottish people. Them with their tape.
Tape. He uses tape over there. Look at him.
Yeah, it's hard for them to get those programming sessions done when they have to make all those haggis breaks.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, publisher Take-Two were, quote, thuggish pornographers, end quote, and, quote, a corporate porn to kids enterprise, end quote. Now, while the filings are certainly entertaining, and I will share the link in the description to this filing because it's fun to read, the rest of the proceedings in the case are pretty mundane, as Jack, staring down the barrel of paying for all of Take-Two's legal expenses, ultimately relented. That's not a joke. He really does back down. On April the 18th, 2007, Thompson and Take-Two reached a settlement wherein they agreed to the following. Thompson agreed not to sue on his own behalf to block the sale of any game made, sold, or distributed by Take-Two, Rockstar, or any of their respective parent companies or subsidiaries. However, he could still represent other parties looking to sue Take-Two, such as in a wrongful death suit, as he's done in the past. Thompson agreed to not contact any Take-Two or affiliated representative with his claims, accusations, or legal threats, although he was still free to make them in public. Moreover, any future communication Thompson wanted to do with the company, such as regarding any future litigation, had to be through an official legal representative, so he could no longer randomly message random staff members and clients, which he had been doing up to that point. So he had to go to official legal channels to talk to these people.
I can imagine just getting calls from him when you're trying to do your job at work. Just calling random people.
And that's basically what happened. He would just contact random folks. Like, he would go through their staff directories and just reach out to people and say, you're peddling porn to children, or you're enabling porn for children, or whatever. Now, in turn, Take-Two agreed to dismiss their suit against Jack, as well as the criminal contempt charges, which you recall we talked about in our last episode, that they filed criminal contempt charges for all of these accusations he was making against them and the judge in that bully case. They agreed to drop that as part of this, and that Jack and Take-Two would cover their own legal expenses. And so they agreed to that. When asked for comment, Jack explained to a GameSpot reporter following the settlement that he was happy with how things shook out, calling it, quote, a huge victory, and, quote, they dropped the contempt matter in state court. I got everything I wanted, end quote.
Yeah, because he just wants to waste people's time, so he did get what he wanted.
He did all that for free. I mean, he didn't get to destroy Take-Two utterly, so I guess he didn't get quite all of the things he wanted. But I guess if we're looking at, glass half full, he's not going to jail, and he's not going to have to pay Take-Two for all their legal expenses.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's all right.
However, just because he was no longer at the risk of going to jail didn't mean he was out of trouble, and the end of his criminal contempt charges did not bring an end to Thompson's mounting disciplinary woes. 2 months before the settlement, on February the 3rd, 2007, Game Politics reported that Jack was, this is the gaming news blog, Game Politics, reported that Jack was facing a review by the Florida Supreme Court at the behest of the Florida State Bar Association, where they would decide whether he could still practice law. When asked for comment, Thompson remained defiant, declaring of the Florida Bar Association, quote, "It's in far more trouble than I am," end quote.
Don't worry about me, worry about them.
Yeah.
Stop looking at me, look over there instead.
Yeah. Now, that being said, Jack was clearly entering what I like to call the finding out phase of his legal career. Jack's disciplinary hearing involved 5 separate complaints, included over 6,000 pages of transcripts of harassing emails, faxes, and other correspondence Jack sent to judges who ruled against him, lawyers who represented his opponents, and at least one lawyer who had nothing to do with any of his cases whom Jack clearly decided he wanted to fuck with. Like, I've read through the disbarment ruling. It's like, there's a bunch of them are like places like Blank Rome, a couple of the other judges, like the judge in the Devin Moore case, he would send lots of messages. And there's just like this one random lawyer who had nothing to do with any of his cases, who I think he thought was like connected politically, and would just send him stuff.
Maybe he just didn't like him and wanted to waste his time. Like, oh, damn, we got another packet in the mail from Jack.
I mean, you mentioned this, and again, I'll give a call back to your great episode on the modest video game proposal. Like, there was this one lawyer he was beefing with where he tried to get him disbarred for being gay, and he started sending the Florida Supreme Court a whole bunch of gay porn.
Yeah, sealed briefs full of literal gay pornography.
Yeah, so... And this is, I mean, the thing about people talk about all the gamers who complain to the bar. What got him before the Bar Association was none of his feuds with like random people online. It wasn't with Penny Arcade. It was with the fact that he was doing these things to people who were representatives of the legal system, to judges, to law firms. Like, he was sending things that you really, like, it's one thing to be like a troll on the internet, but this is one of those situations where, one, he's building a documented paper trail. And 2, he's doing it to people who are also, not for nothing, know the legal system and know how to tear him down in this way. So not a great plan, I would say. He also did himself no favors at the proceedings, engaging in immature outbursts against both witnesses and the presiding judge, David Tunis, who made frequent assertions to Jack to compose himself. There are transcripts in the disbarment of exchanges he has with Judge Tunis, where she's like, settle down, Jack. How is this helping you, Jack?
I know that it's far more extreme situations in which they actually break out the gag in court, if you've seen that. No. It's pretty special. It's, yeah.
I want to see Jack wheeled out in like the Hannibal Lecter mask. Love your suit, Judge Tunis. He also sent, speaking of Judge Tunis, he also sent her over 500 emails, faxes, and other communications throughout the 18 months of hearings, even after being told to stop. This culminated in the last day of the proceedings when Jack stormed out of the courtroom after Judge Tunis refused to let him read an 8-page written objection to his disbarment hearing, where he, among other things, this is fun. It's too long for us to read here, but reading the overall piece is so fun, because it's like, he said Judge Tunis could not disbar him because, according to Thompson, she wasn't a real judge. And he goes into things like, he calls like, this is a kangaroo court run by fascists.
There's actually 3 kids in a trench coat. If we pull it off, this whole thing's gonna fall apart.
It's at the end is it's a Scooby-Doo reveal. Pulls a mask off. So he had this whole long written statement that he is going to read as his final statement at the end of the proceedings. And Judge was like, fuck no, I'm not gonna let you do that. And he, going back to it, so again, he claimed that the judge could not disbar him because she wasn't a real judge. He claimed that there were these huge conspiracies against him, like what I said in the last case, and he was certain that he was going to be vindicated. And this is how he ended it. And Ryan, I'll have you read this one because you haven't read one yet. This is how he concludes the statement. And again, he's fighting for his legal career right here, and this is how he ends it.
Try to get me disbarred. Go ahead. Do your worst. I'll continue to do my best. With gusto.
For someone who does like video games, he sounds like a Pokemon protagonist sometimes. Like, he's gonna be like, that's why I gotta catch them all.
Do your worst. So he wanted to read this aloud, this statement. And I'll put this in the description too, because the whole transcript ended up in the press. So he wanted to read this out loud. And Judge Tunis said, no, absolutely not. Am I going to let you read this out loud? I believe at one point she said, I'm not going to let you turn this into another one of your press conferences. And so Jack, being an extremely mature individual, had printed out multiple copies of this. He walked around, and this is in the disbarment notes. He started walking around the courtroom with these photocopy paper copies he has, and just started handing them to people. And there was even one lawyer, I think it was a lawyer representing the state, who would not take it from him, and he just literally dropped it on their lap.
Wow.
Just parading around the courtroom like mature grown-ups do before he just walked off. He left. He stormed out of his own disbarment hearing because they wouldn't let him read this thing. And again, dares the judge to do her worst.
Your worst. Okay.
And on July the 9th, 2008, the Florida Supreme Court, in light of Jack's extensive, well-documented history of defamatory and personal attacks against his legal opponents and his perceived enemies, compounded by his complete and utter lack of self-reflection, remorse, or interest in changing, permanently disbarred him. Now, some context for that too. Initially, he was up for a 10-year disbarment. They decided, in light of all of this, that Jack needed to be permanently disbarred.
Yeah, Lifetime Achievement Award.
Exactly. To be fair, he did get what he asked for. He said to do their worst.
Okay, what's our worst? All right, let's do that.
Well, he's still alive.
Yeah.
The timing of this is so interesting too, because it's like 2007. Like, we have YouTube now, like the sort of modern video game ecosystem kind of existing, and now he's getting. It's like in a Western when you see like a car drive by. It's like, oh no, these people don't belong in this time. They're and it's like, yeah, he's kind of reaching the end of the time when games were just like this like weird thing you could just. Now it's like people are like, okay, yeah, we're kind of sick of you.
Yeah, and for context of all that, like this is at the same time that those battles over anti-video game legislation are still happening in the courts right now. So like there had been laws restricting access to violent video games in some way, shape, or form in a bunch of different states at this point. There are a few that passed. So like there's one in Louisiana, there's one in Washington State, there's one in I want to say in Minnesota, there's one in Illinois. And this is around that time when they've been making their way through the courts and judges left and right were striking them down. Like they're making it through the state legislatures, but the games industry is challenging them and they're not holding up to First Amendment challenges. Like they're seen as violating free speech. And eventually this built up a case that by 2011, when the U.S. Supreme Court rules in the case of Brown v. EMA, they basically rule that video games have free speech protection. They cite all of that legal precedent. And that's all that's happening while Jack is getting disbarred. To say nothing of Jack's inadvertent contributions, because like his wrongful death lawsuits get thrown out for a lot of the same reasons, and that builds up more precedent that video games require free speech protection under, like, you couldn't do this, for example, to film, to printed word, things like that. And so, yeah, this is part of for Jack, his part of it, this is kind of the part, the wheels are starting to come off. He is losing legitimacy. Again, as Jay, you pointed out in your modest video game proposal episode, like his modest video game proposal where, like, he's like, I will commission $10,000 to have a video game where all my personal enemies are brutally murdered, really did a lot to also alienate him among people who would have supported him anyway. So people are coming, it's like, okay, he's kind of a crank and a nut, and like we cannot affiliate ourselves with this and stay serious. So all this is kind of coming together, and now he's getting disbarred. Now he's out of this part of the game. Nevertheless, to this day, Jack Thompson maintains that he was the victim. A lone crusader railroaded by a corrupt, ethically compromised justice system for daring to speak out against the violent, sadistic pornographers in the video game industry, and he still believes he will ultimately be vindicated in the end. As he explained in an April 7, 2016 interview for Inverse. And who wants to read this one?
Here, I can close out another Jack quote.
All right.
Every lawsuit ever brought against the tobacco companies for decades was a failure until suddenly one got through and that opened the floodgates. I believe that's my legacy. A much more skilled attorney than I ever was is going to break through. Gaming needs its own Better Call Saul lawyer where a defendant gets off for the influence of video games.
I don't think he watched that show.
He saw a preview.
He saw a commercial. He didn't really understand the point of it.
Well, it had a lawyer in it, and he was a lawyer.
Yes.
Yeah. That does make me think, though, is that like Jack Thompson, if he sticks around long enough, he might like live long enough to see like legislation against gaming for like gambling or loot boxes or such. It makes me wonder how he's going to react to that. Is he like, finally vindication, or is like, no, it's the violence, you fools, not the gambling. Gambling's fine. That's American as apple pie.
I wasn't paying attention to that part. Maybe I should have been.
Yeah.
If he did that stuff, then gamers might be on his side.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. Oh, if he came out against predatory monetization and
Yeah.
like directed this his let's say energy into that. But yeah, I think what's interesting about this too is like the fact that he is still focused on the idea that the big issue in video games is that video games are murder simulators. That video games are going to cause some kind of violent behavior that it either trains people to be better with weapons or psychologically conditions them, kind of shows that's again going back to your reference, Jay, about like, it's like seeing a car go through the old west kind of thing, like it's a product of an older age. Like this is not where the discourse over the potential harm of video games is anymore. This is at this point a bygone relic of that. Like the bigger concerns are like what you pointed out, Ryan. There's concerns about monetization in games and exploiting people with gambling mechanics on one hand. And I think on the other hand, you have like one of the other talking points is like online radicalization and how online game communities create these environments where people become like, radicalized into violent ideas, for example. I think about like the what was it, the whole thing that the Trump the Department of Justice after Charlie Kirk was killed said about the guy who killed him had like references to Helldivers carved on his guns, and like I think that's a lot of where the conversation is now, and like nobody's really talking about this one, with the exception of like the gun lobby will bring this up after a mass shooting happens. They'll say, oh yeah, video games did that, but in terms of like the big thing people talk about, I would like to think this is a settled issue at this point. Like he is holding on to this last thing that wasn't really relevant. I mean, this is a quotation in 2016, hadn't been relevant for almost a decade at that point.
Definitely. Yeah, that is kind of a tragic part of his legacy too, is now a lot of people of our age will sort of like have this built-in reflex to distance themselves from anything that might challenge or question gaming as a medium, because we spent our formative years seeing ourselves as being under attack for these bullshit reasons. And maybe later on it's like yeah, no, playing video games didn't turn you into a murderer, but it does like shape the people you hang out with and like the types of, it does affect, you spend a lot of time if it can affect you for positive, as most people who play video games will say that they have, then it's not really that much of a stretch of imagination. You might think it might have some sort of negative effect. Well, and that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with games, but we should at least try and understand that a little better, I feel.
Yeah, and I think it's more the question of communities that people associate with those things and what messages those communities have. And that's so much of the conversation about the internet as a whole,
I wonder why he never went after because he went after Bully and GTA. He never went after the Red Dead games.
That's a good question.
Did he just see them as like an accurate portrayal of that time period? So it's fine because that's what was happening.
I'm looking at when the first Red Dead Redemption comes, because Red Dead Revolver came out in 2004.
Yeah, and that wasn't like a super big smash hit, the first one. So that's why most people don't even really know about it until the Rockstar ones.
Yeah, and I think that
the second.
Yeah, and I think that also like at that point, like during the 2000s, like Grand Theft Auto is the sexy one to target because it had a lot of popular attention. I mean, he did target other games in kind of indirect ways. Like he would do sting operations where he would send his son into stores and when he was underage and buy M-rated video games and then report the stores that did it. And so like he had at least, I know at one point he had his kid go buy a copy of BioShock and then report, I think like Best Buy or something for it. And he did it, I think, also with Killer 7 too. I think he had his son go in and buy a copy of Killer 7 and then say, yeah.
Sorry, I must interrupt you. To be fair, having worked at a store where we sold the video game movie music store back in the day, we sold a lot of like the M-rated stuff and the explicit parental advisory stuff. And no one told us explicitly don't card people, but when I did not sell an R-rated movie to an obvious child, they were all flummoxed and basically just said just sell it to him anyway. Like they really weren't paying attention. He could have gone in and his kid could have been going in there and getting GTA or whatever. Yeah, we were not paying attention back then.
Yeah, that is kind of an interesting knock-on effect too. Like in Europe, they use PEGI, which is like the pan-European gaming thing, where it's like a government institute that's like independent, whereas in America, the ESRB is like an industry nonprofit that self-regulates. So there's always going to be that kind of conflict where in the end, it's like they'll put up all these barriers and like put all these rules, but ultimately, they exist to help the game industry make money. So it's always going to be that sort of fundamental compromise as opposed to it being something outside of it. Like I think we haven't think about that a lot because recently there's been this thing where the ESRB is refusing to reclassify games for having gambling elements to them, whereas PEGI is being a lot more proactive and being like, yeah, the soccer game might technically be E for everyone, but it has gambling elements that make it not suitable for children. You can kind of see how this is sort of the new conflict that's emerging.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. That was a sticking point for critics of the ESRB going back to its inception in 1994 was always the thing. It's a nonprofit, but it's an industry-driven nonprofit, and that it'll always be compromised. Like the National Institute of Media and the Family, which was a big critic of games, Jack Thompson worked really closely with them until he alienated them because of the modest video game proposal. They would put out report cards every single year about how the ESRB was being enforced and how they were disseminated to parents, and they would give it a letter grade every year. And eventually they got to the point where it was like, this is not working at all. We have one that's backed by us that we think should be the rating system instead. And that became the battle, at least for a little bit of the 2000s. And some people tried to throw some weight in it, like Joe Lieberman. But yeah, the question now of like where the rating system fits and everything and all that stuff is like, that was something that people were talking about. It's like, well, this is an industry one. They're going to look to protect their assets ultimately when it comes down to it.
Again, that's also just so interesting. Again, going back to the store I worked at, is the rating system is only as effective as it is in terms of people understanding it and choosing what they want to do around it. Like, again, I remember another time when I worked there, this woman came in and she was buying a CD for her daughter who was I revealed that her daughter was like 14, and it was an album that was the explicit, but we also had the clean version, had the green sticker on it. It was like, the cleaned up version. She didn't understand what the difference was between the two, and so I explained it to her, and she looks at me and she goes, "Which one do you think my daughter would want?" And I was just like, I don't know, man. And so she decided to get the clean one, and she left. And maybe 5 minutes later, she came back in and returned it for the other one because she called her daughter from the car and told her what she bought. And her daughter was like, "No, I don't want that one. I want the other one. Go back and get the other one." And she was like, "I'm sorry, I'll go get it." So,
want the real one, not the fake one.
Yeah. I don't want to meet I'm curious the teen who does want the censored version.
just get Kids Bop and get it over with.
Exactly. Wings and pizza.
I know a guy in high school who probably would have wanted the censored version. Not high school, college.
He's like, "Ooh."
Is it somebody I know?
No, you didn't know. He went to Rowan with me. We were in the elevator and I said something like I was just making conversation. We were in like his first time I met him. We're doing projects together, and we had to mix asphalt. We were going up to the storage area to get like the different aggregates and stuff, and we're in the big service elevator. I'm just standing there like, big ass elevator, huh? Sitting there, and he goes, "Can you not curse in front of me, please?" And I went, okay. Sorry, I guess.
What did you end up having to refer to the stuff you were mixing up as after that?
Hot mix asphalt.
But you can't say that. He said you have to not to swear.
Rear end fault.
I had it's okay if it's part of another role. We're gonna make some butt fault.
But fault.
So for the rest of this, we're going to kind of start like pulling back a little. So Jack Thompson, he's been permanently disbarred. He remains permanently disbarred. He will never practice law again. He maintains because people were mean to him and thought he was telling too much truth. But there's lots of evidence to the contrary of that. I think one thing we're going to do for the rest of this is kind of pull back where I think the larger picture is for Jack Thompson's crusade. Because on the one hand, it's pretty easy, and as we've covered, super fun to make fun of Jack Thompson's mad legal crusade against video games because he's such he becomes this reputation of like this Silver Age comic book nemesis of video games during the late 90s and 2000s. But it wouldn't be Scandalous Games if I didn't ruin everybody's fun for at least a little bit. And I feel like there are some dark sides to Thompson's crusade that I think boil down to 3 points. Point number one is that Jack's crusade was, let's be honest, it was built on a foundation of exploiting vulnerable people for his own ends. Like, many of these are wrongful death lawsuits he does. So that means time and again, he reached out to grieving families, specifically those who lost children to violence, worming his way into their lives when they were at their most vulnerable, and using their grief to advance his weaponization of the legal system against his personal enemies while elevating his own celebrity and like basically giving them no resolution or closure. Like the victims of like the Heath High School shooting or, any of those things he claims allegedly for Grand Theft Auto, like they were dealing with real things. They had real losses. And you get this guy coming in there and it's like, well, the real thing that really killed your children was because people played too many violent video games. And kind of like taking advantage of when they're at their most vulnerable.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, it also kind of sounds like not just what you said, which is true, but also putting the greater argument out there to the public of, if you're against me, then you're for dead children. You want this to happen, similar to the people who came to his house when his wife was recovering from cancer, and he used that, right, as like, and they're doing it while she's here recovering from cancer. It's an exploitative bad faith argument meant to bolster himself. Sorry, yeah. I didn't mean to totally interrupt you, sorry.
No, but you're right, though. It's, no one's going to say that they're pro child death in the public. And I think he's setting that up as like, if you are like, he's basically, and it's the metaphorical waving the bloody shirt kind of thing. Like he is saying like, here are these dead kids because of Grand Theft Auto, because of Doom, because of whatever. And like, he's exploiting people to do that, to take advantage of this. He's putting them in this position. He's again, not giving them any resolution or closure that I can see. And I'd say, protracting their pain is, I guess, the way I would think about it.
Yeah, that feels very much like you spend years being told that this was the cause of your problem, and you don't get any sort of closure or catharsis because you don't win, you don't get any sort of payout, and also you're back from square one. Now you have to start like recontextualizing it, figuring out like, yeah, it does not seem like a pleasant thing to go through as someone on the family side of it.
Yeah, so that's one I think important point with Jack. Another important point number two, and I cannot overstate this, and we've kind of covered this a bit already, but a significant portion of Jack's fight against video games, in fact, I would say his moral crusade against the media at large. So this counts for both his fights against like, shock jocks like Neil Rogers and Howard Stern, and rap groups like Two Live Crew and Luther Campbell. Is that so much of Jack's fight is built upon wasting people's time and money. So like his various legal complaints in his suits, they tie up the legal system, to say nothing of anti-game legislation that he pushed for that ended up getting ruled unconstitutional because people have to push that through the system at that point. For example, according to a September the 5th, 2007 Ars Technica report, the violent video game law he introduced in Louisiana, because he did craft some legislation and this was passed. It was passed in Louisiana. It was challenged in the courts. It was passed in 2006. It was thrown out by the courts in 2008 for violating the First Amendment. This ended up costing Louisiana taxpayers around $91,000. To say nothing of all of the legislative and legal effort behind it. So like this actually did waste people's time and money going through this process. On top of that, an understated portion of Jack's crusade, something I hadn't really considered until I started pouring through the evidence from his disbarment. So when I started reading through the disbarment hearing, is just the extent of his harassment and how it impacted his numerous victims when it came to wasting people's time. So like, as I mentioned, Jack would just deluge people with, faxes and emails and phone calls and like correspondence and press releases where he would accuse them of all sorts of heinous crimes. And like, actual crimes like bribery and obstruction of justice and corruption, never providing any evidence of this, but putting this out there. And like, this is kind of like the textbook definition of defamation. He's defaming people by trying to link them to crimes. And several victims noted blocking Jack's email address, only for him to set up new accounts so he could resume his accusations of lying, racketeering, and child pornography. So like Blank Rome would block his email address, and so he would make new email addresses so he could keep doing it.
Jack Thompson 2, Jack Thompson 3, Jack Thompson 4.
All right, what we have to... Okay, it's another email from Jack Thompson 420.
Jack Kick-Ass Thompson.
Oh yeah, he starts having some fun with it.
He starts using the different X's and the tildes to give like a cool anime border.
Yeah.
Jack Thompson, 3 N's.
Yeah. And so like he would do these and like he would send them to the press, he would send them to politicians, he would send them to the president of the United States. I don't know say anybody read them, but like he would go to any kind of legal or official channels. Like when it came to things like Blank Rome, he would reach out to their clients, he would reach out to their staff, he would go through the staff directory and email them. And so like as a result of like if it's a law firm, his targets would often have to explain themselves to third parties reaching out to him to figure out what the fuck is going on. And like why this rando lawyer is accusing them of mentally molesting children. Like that's kind of the larger cascading effect of this. And so a case in point of this is Blank Rome. I mentioned they represent Take-Two and they're oftentimes an opponent in Jack's legal fights. Longtime listeners will recall that Thompson devoted an entire level to his modest video game proposal to brutally murdering a law firm standing in for Blank Rome called Blank Stare. So again, check out Jay's episode from I'm From the Internet on a modest video game proposal for some more on that. But like in the case of Blank Rome, on top of him reaching out to basically every Blank Rome affiliated email address he could find and tracking down their clients, representatives had to read through all of his messages because they might be relevant to their cases involving Jack. So like if he's suing them and they're building a case against him, anything he sends could potentially be relevant to them. This forced him to devote extensive time, resources, and client money to parsing through all of his bullshit. And so, for an example of this, testifying during his disbarment, Blank Rome attorney Rebecca Ward expressed the firm's frustration with dealing with Jack. Who wants to read this one?
I'll do it.
Oh yeah, go Ryan, go for it.
All right, this one's a little long, so here we go.
All right. First, and on the most simple basis, every email that he sends, and he sends numerous ones, they come in a flood, dozens at a time. You just have the time to devote to read them and to digest them because they are not something that we can afford just to ignore. There are costs in that, just costs and interruptions of the day, costs to the client because it adds to the litigation costs of the case. As I said before, when we get the email that was distributed to all the partners of our law firm, as I said, there were a lot of difficult discussions that occurred because when they received these emails without any understanding of the content about the sort of person that they're coming from, when you have a large law firm, you take accusations of fraudulent activity very seriously.
So it's kind of a game for Jack, but for them, like they have to take this seriously.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Again, I've know some folks who are attorneys and have been, and it's like you can't ignore emails like this, even if you're pretty sure you know what's going on and it's pointless. Like legally, legally you could, sure, but it would put you at risk. Like you have to read it, you have to understand it. There has to be a record that you did that, and also like lawyers bill in very small. Well, like I know some lawyers bill in as little as 7-minute increments of their time. So like that means if one of Jack's emails is just "you suck, love Jack," that's still going to be a billable increment of time. Yeah, you still have to read it. You still have to do at least a minimal amount of billing, and then if it takes you 10 minutes to read it, then it might be more billable increments like that. And yeah, that totally adds up. To say nothing of the massive distraction it is.
Yeah, it feels like kind of like if you work as a cashier and you have a customer that uses you as their therapist, kind of like the lawyer equivalent of that, where it's just like, I'll get fired if I ignore this guy, but he's really wasting both our times here.
Yeah, so this goes on with these people. And so for another example, Judge James Moore, who presided over the Devon Moore case back in 2003. Again, no relation between James and Devon. So Judge James Moore was another one of these people who found himself in Jack's crosshairs after he revoked Jack Thompson's temporary license to practice law in Alabama because he relentlessly sent harassing messages to Blank Rome. So going back to that case, Thompson is certified to practice law in Florida. If you were going to practice law in another state, like doing a case like in Alabama, you have to apply for something called a pro hoc vice, which is basically like a temporary certification to practice law in the state. So Jack gets a pro hoc vice to practice in Alabama so he can be the lawyer in this wrongful death case. After the waves of harassment that Jack is sending to Blank Rome, to the point where they were trying to, when the trial starts, their first motion is to kick him off the case. And as we talked about, Jack eventually just leaves the case on his own. This prompts a report to the Bar Association. The bar investigates. Jack forgot to disclose that he had a disciplinary history, which is one of the things you're supposed to do when you apply for one of these things. He didn't disclose that. His claim is that they told him he didn't have to. So all that stuff is going on in Florida with like Two Life Crew and stuff, that they're getting a psychological evaluation. He didn't disclose that. And so they revoke his pro hoc vice for it. And he sees this as a grave injustice, that they're denying him the ability to practice law here, that James Moore has a personal vendetta against him. And as a result of that, Jack spent 4 years, sending Moore's office countless faxes accusing the judge of corruption and conspiring against him, which Jack also sent to media outlets who then reached out to Moore's office for comment. As the judge explained to the Florida Bar Association, quote, and who wants to read this one?
All right, I'll try one.
All right.
He was continuously sending documents to my office 3, 4, 5 times a day, easy. Every day it seemed like a lot. Plus, when he would send his media alerts out that he composed and sent out, when he sends them to these media people, then they call my office. We got calls from all over the world about this.
So it's like another part of this. It's like, so, and I think of this like in this light, and this was when I was reading through these things about these accounts, because there's lots of them like this in his disbarment. It's like Jack, he comes off as kind of less of a wrestling heel and more like a menace. Like he's terrorizing anyone who gets in his way in service of his crusade.
He's out there with his lawsuit slingshot, being a menace.
Yeah, and he's hitting anybody who gets in his way, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like throwing a water balloon. Everyone gets splashed when they get hit by it.
Yeah.
And so we have those first 2 points. One, that I feel like he's exploiting tragedy, and tragedy involving usually the violence deaths of children to advance his ideas. On the other hand, he is, again, wasting people's time in terms of like money and like mental energy and resources behind this. So those are 2 points. And so the last point of this, and point number 3, is that it's easy to portray Jack as an unhinged clown, because I think there's plenty of evidence to show that, and the kind of the quintessential old man yelling at clouds when it comes to violent video games. However, I think that belies another dark undertone of this crusade, which is while railing against the perceived evils of bully and manhunt and whatever other cyber bees got into his bonnet, Jack became a useful mouthpiece for some really odious people and interest groups. So first and foremost, we've got his best friend, and by his admission, his inspiration, the self-proclaimed killologist Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Jack cites him as the inspiration. He writes a whole section of his memoir, Out of Harm's Way, about how he reaches out to Dave. Dave gives him the idea to start suing the games industry. You could argue that by his assessment, Grossman was the reason for all of this that got us Jack. And we've talked about Dave a bunch in the past, and like a lot of Jack's talking points come straight from Grossman's assessment of video games. I'm pretty sure the term murder simulator, which Jack uses, is something taken from Dave, because it borrows a lot of his rhetoric, which was a lot of Dave Grossman's rhetoric was that video games train people to kill. They either help them with marksmanship training, somehow, or they help people psychologically get psychologically conditioned to view violence and death pleasurably, and so that they will be more likely to do it in real life. That's kind of Dave Grossman's argument. But this is also like the same guy, and like the thing about Dave and Jack is they would often appear on the same news specials making the exact same claims about video games enhancing school shooters' weapons, proficiency, and conditioning them to kill. And I'll remember that this is the same guy that we devoted a 14-part series to this, about how ultimately Dave, on the one hand, sees violent video games as, conditioning people to kill. This is the same guy who's made a very, very lucrative business going to law enforcement officers and saying that you need to be ready to kill at the least provocation, and that you are morally justified in killing people, and that you'll have the best sex of your life after you shoot somebody. Like, that's also what he's saying. So on one hand, like, Jack is becoming another way for Dave to press his messages, his killology gospel. And another group that benefit from all this is like the gun lobby. And like the gun lobby going back to the late 1990s, they're pretty front and center about the whole idea that, guns don't kill people, it's violent media kills people. And there are numerous instances, one or few of which we might cover in future episodes, about how the gun lobby would always point towards violent video games are actually what's causing death. It's not the access to deadly weapons. And this is why we need to, restrict the video games as opposed to like gun control. And Jack becomes like another convenient person advocating for these kinds of ideas to help kind of get them more into the public setting and take attention away from, one would argue, more meaningful changes, things that could help actually make things better, And the other part of that too is, on top of all that, is the sinister unspoken goal of Jack's war on the likes of, Bully or Manhunt or Socks the Cat Rocks the Hill or whatever. What I think is ultimately kind of the thing that's at the heart of this, that Jack professed he was not a censor. He claimed up, down, and sideways, I'm not here to censor video games. I just want to keep them out of the hands of children. He sees video games as these dangerous substances that, Bully is going to mentally warp children. Grand Theft Auto is going to be warping children. I'm not for censorship. I just want to make sure kids don't get access to these games. But if we look at the big picture, for Jack, ultimately the most effective way to keep the likes of, Blood Orgy, Sex Magic 6 from little Timmy and Tammy is to make game companies so afraid of the financial and legal consequences of making that content that they'll never make it in the first place, that they will self-censor. And this is a phenomenon in First Amendment law known as a chilling effect, that basically people or groups will restrict their own free speech, even if it's protected speech, for fear of retaliation. And I think in doing so, in his crusade against video games, Jack played a card common among other conservative backlashes. Like, basically, he weaponizes children to suit his own ends. Let's just be upfront about that. I think he's got this ultimate goal, and his way of getting about that is like, see these dead children here that are killed from like Columbine or the Paducah shooting or whatever. This is why we need to restrict violent video games. And you see this in like other conservative movements too. Like, how many arguments we see where it's about protecting children and therefore we need like fewer rights. Think about like bathroom bills or like don't say gay bills, because oftentimes they argue that like we are peddling, smut to children or something, or putting children at greater risk of like, assault or something like that. There's so much that can be said about the way that terrible things have been done on the argument that we are protecting children from them. And I think Jack is kind of part of a larger piece of that. In that light, like Jack's ultimate goal was never, I don't think it was ever about protecting kids from the corrupting influence of media. And I think it was more about using children as a means to completely eliminate video games as a form of creative expression. Like, it's reduce them to children's toys or with no cultural or artistic meaning beyond like, building blocks or something, I think that's ultimately what he would want. I think his ultimate goal is like, there can be no corrupting media if video games are not a media, that the easiest way to keep Grand Theft Auto out of the hands of children is that there's no more Grand Theft Auto anymore. And it doesn't matter that there are adults who play these things. Like the fact that there are adult players is not factoring into this. In fact, he's, I would say, deliberately ignoring that fact. So that's a lengthy way of saying I think that these are the kinds of things that make Jack's crusade a little bit worse than on the surface.
Like I can definitely see that. Yeah, and how that there are those knock-on effects now. I definitely see him reinforcing that. And like you mentioned, even now, like a part of why I think too is like video games as an industry, like they became now they're the biggest entertainment industry I think we have. But it was like even back then it was big enough where now the gun industry couldn't push it around as much. It's still kind of like we didn't really have that much of a good like social change. It's just as a business it became big enough that it couldn't be pushed around as much. And also now more people play them, so it's not just this mysterious other. But it does make me, like a little worried about whatever the next thing to come along might be, that now that we've kind of reinforced these bad patterns on both sides with this.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that we can just see a lot of the ripple effects here, and there's the knee-jerk reaction of, can we look at the negative aspects of video games, whether it's violent video games or otherwise? And, Jay, what you were saying earlier, it's sort of like, this takes a lot of the wind out of the sails of any serious discourse about that, because it's just viewed as this knee-jerk reaction, oh, violent video games. It's a punchline at this point. And, Kevin, I agree with you that, like, the way that he parades around dead children and people who have experienced huge losses just as a way to kind of get his way. I mean, you see this as again with these bad faith arguments, just for someone to get their own way. Yeah, it's I don't know. It is pretty bleak, as you say. Some of it's kind of funny, just the absurdity of it. But his tactics are disgusting, and yeah, it does some long-term harm.
Yeah, going along with that, I know this is something I'm gonna keep plugging on from the internet for this, because I think you made a really good point in your second part of the episode on the Modest Video Game Proposal, Jay. The fact that there are a lot of gamers who start to they get defensive in this time, and they start circling the wagons when they're faced with all these accusations that video games are murder simulators, and that has kind of like a knockaround effect for pretty much like any even good faith criticism of video games becomes perceived by certain people as people are trying to do the Jack Thompson treatment to games. They're trying to restrict games or ruin games in some way. And we see this later on with like Gamergate. You see a bunch of comparisons of Gamergate supporters to like anyone they feel is criticizing video games, like your Anita Sarkeesians kind of. They see these people as another wave of these outsiders like Jack who don't understand video games, who are trying to say that we are bad for playing or liking them, and therefore we need to push them out the way we push Jack out too. And that leads into like all sorts of horrible harassment tactics, and the way some people weaponize that weaponized that defensiveness that gamers had on the internet from the 2000s into the 2010s, and then shifted it into these other circles. And we see the after effects of that even to the present day. We see how we talked about the Real Game Awards, and sort of anti-woke crowd have made a whole business on these outsiders who are at the gates who are trying to tell us, oh no, gay people exist and they can be in video games, and black people exist and can be in video games, and how the defensiveness against Jack Thompson helped to beget this kind of culture of defensiveness that eventually other people were able to weaponize. But if there's a positive to be taken, let's give Jack credit where credit's due. And I think you pointed this out, Jay, in our last episode. It's like one of the things that really works out is that Jack is, when it comes down as a lawyer, he's really incompetent. He's not a very good lawyer. And a lot of these cases end up helping video games in the long run as a result of that. So I think Jack, he plays actually a really instrumental role in granting video games the kinds of protections that other creative media enjoy. So on the one hand, he kept presenting the same tired argument in every wrongful death suit, failing over and over again to advance his cause, and by doing so, built up a body of legal precedent that would help strengthen the argument that laws restricting creative expression in video games, even if it involved sex or violence, was against the law. And without Jack's efforts in this regard, we may not have had video games receive free speech protection in the US. And for more bit on that and kind of Jack's inadvertent role in it, check out our Brown v. EMA episode, because he would make these arguments and he wouldn't often mix up what he was saying among different lawsuits, and the suit would fail. And now when other lawsuits would happen, the judge could point to, this is why this fails because this other one failed. So one good example is there was a big $5 billion lawsuit against the games industry arguing that it caused the Columbine shooting. And that one failed. It wasn't put together by Jack Thompson. It was put together by this guy named John DeCamp. John DeCamp's a weird guy. Check out our 2-part series on John DeCamp, weird conspiracy guy. But his lawsuit in the Columbine case was virtually identical to Jack's wrongful death lawsuit from 1999, the one in the Heath High School shooting. And so judges can point to, well, this one failed for these reasons, and therefore this one's going to fail for the same reasons. And so Thompson's failed attempts helped to build that precedent and make it easier to say video games have free speech protection, because we can't make any justification that they caused the things that they claim they did. And we've basically established that as law. So that's on the one hand.
So he's actually a video game hero.
Yeah, I'm serious. I think he's kind of a reluctant, like an unlikely hero for video games. Like, would we be in this position now with games where this is all settled now? Were it not for Jack, were it not for him being this rabble rouser who was just like so much of the games' free speech is almost built on the fact that Jack was a bad lawyer. And on top of that, his petty feuds, combined with his pathological inability to keep his trap shut, successfully alienated people who otherwise would be sympathetic to his cause. Such as officials in the legal system and even other crusaders against the media. And again, we'll talk about his breakup with the National Coalition on Television Violence another day. And again, check out the I'm from the Internet episode on the Modest Video Game Proposal, because Jay, you and Winslow talk a bit about this. Hey there, fellow netizens. This is Kevin in the editor's show. Just a real slight correction here. I didn't mean to say that Jack Thompson had a fight with the National Coalition on Television Violence. What I meant to say is that Jack Thompson had a feud with the National Institute on Media and the Family, a different media watchdog group. And I promise that episode will come somewhere down the line. But if you want to learn more about the National Coalition on Television Violence, which is another fascinating media watchdog group who is primarily active in the 1980s, I encourage you to check back on our episodes we did with historian Matt Shoemaker on Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons to learn more about that group. So apologies for the slight slip of the tongue there, and back to the show. But yeah, it's hard to make friends with Jack because Jack is he's like a rabid dog. He'll bite his handler even, like he'll lash out in all directions. And at any point you could be against him. And like some, people who are trying to make more subtle changes to this are not necessarily want to be associated with this kind of loose cannon, just firing off in all directions.
Yeah. Like I wonder how many friends he has. Cause I see he mentions like his wife and his kids, but like he doesn't seem to, maybe that's why he had all that time to listen to Neil Rogers. It's like, just hanging out.
I should go into the bar with Jack Thompson after a day of work.
Try to talk to him. He bit me.
I imagine there's sort of like a pattern of like being friendly with someone, whether it's a professional acquaintance or, a friend, and then just they cross him or something, and then it's a pattern of devalue and discard, right? And then it's for an enemy, and there's no going back from that.
Yeah, personal slight decades ago.
It's exhausting to live like that, just as a side note.
He's a guy that would have a list.
Oh, yes.
He's definitely got a list.
I'm reminded of when I told my mom that Kate and I were getting married. My mom had very elaborate plans for what our wedding was going to be. And she rattled off a list of people she wanted to go to our wedding. And she eventually said, not this person, because they give lousy gifts. And the only thing I can interpret from that is they gave my mother a lousy gift when she got married. And at that point, my parents had been married for about 30 years. So my mother had never forgiven that. I think about like this kind of personal slight that a person holds on to for that long.
Because in the person in question, Kevin, if I recall, I don't remember exactly who they were, but like this was a person you had not seen. Maybe since you were like a teeny tiny child. So it's not even like
no one you intended to invite.
I had no horse in this race, but
well, maybe that's why you never knew them. She's been having this grudge a long time.
It's like I could see that with Jack. And there was I believe it's in the LA Times article that someone wrote on him in the 90s. And he did work for a legal firm in the early 80s. And he left because I think one person said he had personality problems, like he couldn't get along with people. Like it's so fitting for him, And
it's
so
on brand.
Yes. And like it's, to be honest, like simply put, like it's really hard to build a coalition when you're a lone wolf agitator who will lash out at anyone who gets in your way. Like Jack's not really in the business of building a coalition or compromising. That's what's cool about researching Jack. And one of his, of course, his entertaining outbursts, but like there's so much to him. And there's so much of this idea of this person who like, you can make arguments that he had a justifiable or understandable stake in this, but just the incredible way he attempted to tackle that, See, he's an onion with layers, is like an ogre with layers or whatever.
Stay out of Jack's swamp.
Oh, that
come on, Kev. Now he's gonna rail against every Shrek movie, and there's like 8 of those. No,
I think that would be fun. Jack, what do you think about Shrek?
Shrek Forever After is anti-Christian because it involves time travel, which we all know is not biblically accurate.
It's against God's law. So yeah, he's complicated. He's on one hand like a cartoonish heel to video games, but also like a serial harasser and like a soundboard for some pretty rough ideas. But all at the same time, it's like an inadvertent contribute to the current state of games as entertainment. Like it's a really fascinating thing talking about Jack, I think. However, I wanted to end this tale on a high note. I want to call attention to an amusing exchange that is so quintessentially Jack. so emblematic of Jack and his fight against video games. In May of 2008, a few months before his disbarment, Thompson appeared on the NPR show Talk of the Nation, where he was debating with Adam Sessler. Are we all familiar with Adam Sessler?
Yes, for good and bad reasons.
I'm not.
Did you ever watch X-Play back in the day, Ryan?
No.
Yes, Sessler has been around for a while. People of a certain age probably know him from being on the gaming network G4. He used to host a show called Extended Play, which eventually got rebranded as X-Play, which he was on there for a while. He kind of was a fixture in gaming news for a while, at least as a public-facing person. So he was kind of a fixture for a while in gaming news. And he had no time for Jack. And there were numerous instances where he was brought on TV shows like I think he was on Attack of the Show at one point, another G4 show, where he debated with Jack Thompson over violent video games. So he's for lack of a term, like a sparring partner of Jack Thompson in a couple of these, as kind of the other side of this debate. Games don't cause the things that Jack Thompson says.
Sort of the guy they would bring on to do like a rebuttal or something.
Yeah. Sessler had no time for him, too. He was more willing to call Jack out on things. The thing about Jack Thompson is that Jack is very easily rattled. I think we talked about this before today. It's like he cannot really handle it when people push back against him. And it's funny how quickly he loses his composure. So going back to this Talk of the Nation debate between Sessler and Jack Thompson, it was in May of 2008, and it is so much fun that I think it warrants another brief installment of Scandalous Games Theater. And so for the benefit of our new listeners and benefit for you, Jay, occasionally, we will do an exchange of various figures in an episode in game history, and I'll help people assume the roles of those people here. So we're going to do that for this one here. So we have three characters in our dramatis personae. One of them is Adam Sessler, one of them is Jack Thompson, and one of them is the host of the segment named Neil Conan. So who wants to be Jack, who wants to be Adam, and who wants to be Neil?
I'll be Neil.
I'll be Adam Sessler. I feel like I can do that kind of high energy.
Okay. I'm going to share with you my script here. All right, so Neil Conan's is in the yellow, Jack Thompson's is in the blue, like the light blue, and Adam Sessler's is in the green. So who was being Neil again? Was that you, Kate?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll have you start off, and then it'll go to Ryan. Ryan, you have the role of Jack Thompson in this one.
All right.
Better go punch yourself in the face a few times to get ready.
Psych yourself up.
Psych yourself
Into
up.
Jack mode.
Work up a head of steam.
Hey, tell you
right.
these games are. No, I'm a pirate.
Pirate Jack Thompson.
And so whenever you want to get us started, go ahead, Kate.
All right.
Jack Thompson, yar.
All right. Oh, okay, Mr. Thompson. Oh, okay. I understand that you think one of the characters in Grand Theft Auto 4 is based on you.
Well, they go into a lawyer's office and they kill him. I had my house vandalized, by the way, today by gamers. I get calls, death threats, all the time by gamers. The real issue here is, though, that there is so much sex and so much graphic sex. I'm working with various law enforcement agencies, hopefully with the results that Take-Two corporately, and the chairman, Strauss Zennick, will be indicted for that because this is way, way over the line.
I hope you don't mind if I step in there, Neil. Having played the game, I have yet to discover the graphic sex Mr. Thompson is identifying.
Mr. Thompson, have you played the game?
I just came out and I have a life.
And which law enforcement agencies are you working with?
I'm not going to tell you.
All right, well, thanks very much for speaking with us.
I'm done.
You're done.
Oh, great. I'll go play the game now.
Good luck.
He's so catty.
Babyish.
Well, you didn't answer the question. You just went on a rant. I don't even
not
know
telling
what he
you.
was saying.
Yeah.
You can't make me.
Yes.
It came out. It just came out, and I have a life. That's the reason why Jack hasn't played it.
I was too busy right.
Yeah, he just said, "Oh, there's all this stuff in the game." It's like, well, I haven't played the game. What?
Well, how should I know? I didn't play it. It's just there's all sorts of graphic stuff going on.
I just love it. Neil Conan sees Thompson break down in front of him and hangs up on him.
Okay, you're done. All right, bye.
Because Thompson was on the phone on this thing, and so he starts to have this outburst. It's like, well, we're done, and he hangs up on him.
The rest of this segment is going to just be Neil talking to Adam Sessler about video games.
Like, all right, I'm going to go play the game now.
Yeah.
All right.
I looked to see if I could find an audio recording of this. If I find it, I will put it in the post-production because it's just so funny. Hey there, fellow netizens. This is Kevin in the editor's chair, and I'm happy to say I found it. I did find the full recording. It appeared on the May the 1st, 2008 edition of NPR's Talk of the Nation. I also learned by listening to the recording that the transcript that I had found is actually an abridged version of what the actual exchange was. So with that, jumping off our dramatic reading, I now turn it over to the full unedited exchange between Adam Sessler, Jack Thompson, and Talk of the Nation host Neil Conan, and I will include a link to that in the description.
John Bruce Thompson is an attorney in Miami and an anti-video game activist, and he joins us now by phone from Miami in Florida. Thanks very much for being with us.
Good to be with you.
And I understand that you think one of the characters in Grand Theft Auto 4 is based on you.
Well, they go into a lawyer's office and they kill him. I had my house vandalized today, by the way, by gamers. I get calls, death threats all the time from gamers saying that they want to kill me. And by the way, the game has had no effect on my attitudes or behaviors, which is interesting. But yeah, I'm not. The real issue here, though, is the fact that there's so much sex and so much graphic sex in this game that the distribution of it to minors, which is occurring, is a criminal act. And I'm working with various law enforcement agencies, hopefully with the result that Take-Two corporately and the chairman Strauss-Zelnick will be indicted for that, because this is way, way over the line. I say that as a lawyer, knowing where that line is.
And well, actually, I would have, if you don't mind if I step in there, Neil. Having played the game, I have yet to actually discover the graphic sex that Mr. Thompson is identifying.
Apparently, apparently you aren't very good at finding it. Maybe you weren't looking, but it's up at IGN.com. It was provided by Take-Two to News Corporation, and they put it on the web, so it's out there.
How are you? No. I am aware of the videos that are up on IGN.com.
Adam,
yes.
Adam, can I ask you a question here?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, thanks very much. And John Thompson, let me just ask you, first of all, you've been involved in lawsuits with this company for some time, which is why you think that they might have a joke at your expense by making a parody of you.
No, I don't really care about the parody of me. That's not the point here. The point is that this company is engaged in criminal activity and is mentally molesting minors for money. This is the most graphic, most incredibly sexual product ever been distributed en masse to American children. And it's a criminal act, and that's why I intend to have them held accountable for it.
And have you played the game?
It just came out, and I have a life, and the gentleman said he's been playing it, 20-some hours, and he's 28% of the way through it. The point is that the sexual material, which has been described in the reviews and which you can see with your own eyes that Take-Two has provided to News Corp, is in the game. And in fact, the descriptor on the game, the ESRB descriptor, says strong sexual content. What I have seen is lap dances, simulated fellatio and cunnilingus, S&M between two women while a man watches, language of prostitutes to people in cars that I can't use on an FCC licensed station, and then killing of the prostitutes by shotguns, machine guns, and ramming them into rocks with your vehicle to kill them after you've had the sex. Now, if that's appropriate entertainment for teens, then things have pretty much changed in this country, and not for the better.
And which law enforcement agencies are you working with?
I'm not going to tell you.
All right. Well, thanks very much for speaking with us.
I'm done.
You're done.
Oh, great. Well, I'll go play the game now.
Good luck.
Anyway, back to the show. I thought that was a lot of fun and very emblematic of Jack.
Very.
All right. So, I mean, there's a lot we could do about Jack Thompson. We talked a lot about it here. So why don't we start wrapping things up, and I'll go around the room. Final thoughts.
Well, I think that he's a man with a lot of time on his hands, and he needs better hobbies.
I guess like now that this is all safely in the past, in a weird way, it's kind of almost nostalgic. Like it is fun when like the only people that were attacking this were just like complete and utter cranks that were just like operating from space. Like you couldn't even tell what they were mad at. That was so much more fun than now, where everyone kind of like when they attack gaming, they have a very obvious cynical attitude toward, or it's like, you know, it was so black and white back then. I like how easy this was. It was like video games drive people insane versus no, they don't. It's very easy. Whereas now is it's like, you know, it's like, should kids be playing this type of thing? Does this count as gaming? The lines are much more gray and there's much more of a gradient on everything. And in a weird way, I kind of miss the black and white of that more simple argument, which I guess was why it was more popular back in the day.
And I feel like some of this may have been born of the original argument, been born of a fear of something unfamiliar. It's like the arguments that some folks have against certain new technology at any given point. Like, what's the absolute worst thing that can happen that can catastrophize? I'm not saying that there's like zero merit to those arguments, but
Oh yeah, no, you're
yeah,
absolutely right. That was sort of an irony to me about Jack Thompson was how like he identified with Batman, and it's like a generation ago, comic books were the thing that people like you were mad at, and now you're like being like, hey, I'm just like that guy. Like
yeah,
it is kind of, it is very, and how now that's partially why too. It's like now everyone plays video games, like even on their phones or consoles or whatever. So it's like just that time when gaming was this small niche thing. That's not the world we live in anymore.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very much that persistent thing of one of the breeding grounds for moral panics is, I think, a lack of understanding or an uncertainty over what young people are doing when we're not watching them. And they could be up to anything. They could be listening to that Elvis and, swaying their hips too much.
Shaking their hips all suggestively. Like Forrest Gump taught him. Suggestively.
Yeah, they maybe listen to Motley Crue and swaying their hips too much, I guess. Or reading those Batman comics and, thinking about Robin too much, I guess, And
all we know is it's all in the hips.
that's what all these concerns are. It's about hips.
Yes, as Chubbs taught us, it's all in the hips.
And we're all old enough to remember when the internet, started to get popularized, and the people who first went on there were like the people who started utilizing it were young people. And I just came off doing a bunch of the research into the response to video games over Columbine, and like one of those persistent anxieties is what are young people up to on those message boards, and like fears of like, okay, you could build bombs based on stuff you find on the internet, and now it's more concerns about things like TikTok and like the way the social media is negatively influencing people. Like there's a persistent thing of that is people not really understanding what's going on and fearing what that's going to mean for their children, while at the same time almost like weirdly legitimizing older sources of anxiety. It's like, using the Elvis example, like, Motley Crue and like the hair metal bands of the 1980s are like, why can't it be more like Elvis, and be more safe, or like the Beatles or whatever. You see that, for example, in the panics over violent video games in the 90s that got us the ESRB in the first place. It's like, Mortal Kombat and Night Trap are awful. Why can't it be more like Pac-Man kind of thing, What
about Tetris? I like Tetris. Why can't we just play Tetris?
Oh, everybody loves Tetris. There's no perfect game except Tetris.
The commie Russian conspiracy.
There's a shirt I've been looking for a long time. I came across years ago and I've never been able to find it, which is it sets up Tetris like a Soviet propaganda poster. And it says the slogan is, with every brick, we destroy capitalism.
I can see that.
But yeah, so we get this figure, and like the other part of it is like, it's going back to what you said too, Jay, is like you almost long for this time when it was that simple in terms of the concerns over video games. And like now it went from, video games are murder simulators, and like now it's, the Trump administration puts out video game memes for everything now. Like when they invaded Iran, like showing like clips from like Call of Duty and images of like Donald Trump as Master Chief and RFK Jr. as a Smash Brothers character. Like it's gotten so weird and so complicated and like so insidious now where video games fit in these messages.
And then all those companies have to send them messages to tell them to stop that. We don't like you. Stop associating with us.
Yeah, Nintendo has to sue them. Yeah, but yeah, no, that is definitely how like video games used to be kind of separate from the culture in a weird way, whereas now that's the thing where they're part of the culture. So like a couple years ago, like the best-selling game of the year was that Harry Potter game, and that's very political for reasons that have nothing to do with the actual gameplay or anything. But the fact that even now we care about like who is making our games, where does this money go? Like that's sort of a part of being more mature and responsible as gamers, is that it doesn't always get to be as easy when we discuss stuff. Like as we saw with that one still being a bestseller in spite of all the very legitimate criticisms against it. But that's kind of a part of being a grown-up, I guess, too, is things get more ambiguous and confusing. You just got to do your best to navigate it.
And it speaks to the legitimacy of the medium now, that we're no longer having that question of whether video games are allowed to, basically whether video games are allowed to exist in the form they are. Everyone's kind of had that as a settled thing, and now everyone is having these larger cultural debates over what different video games mean. Like, I'm glad you brought that one up, Jay. I remember like when Hogwarts Legacy is getting successful and like Fox News is putting out like glowing editorials about how we've owned the libs with this video game, whereas years ago they would have said that any video game is going to cause people to murder. It's just so weird where we are now. But it's not weird. I'm from the internet. I mean, it's weird in fun ways. So Jay, where can they find out more about I'm From the Internet and about you and your show?
Oh yeah, my podcast is called I'm From the Internet. You can find it basically everywhere podcasts are. We're hosted on Acast. Since this is going to be coming out later, I can give you a glimpse at what I'm working on right now. I'm doing an episode on the Ouya, so that's going to be very fun because we get to sort of talk about this interesting moment in gaming when like mobile gaming was just becoming a thing, like Steam Greenlight was just starting, like this kind of moment when like the walls between the different genres are breaking down, and one person was kind of at the right place to cash in on it without actually having much of an impact. It's a very fun story.
Nice. Oh, is a lot of fun.
Yeah, we got a fun guest for that too. We got Frost of Rivia from formerly from The Escapist is going to be guesting on it, so that's going to be fun.
Cool.
Have you ever done any episodes on like the back rooms and that kind of stuff?
I haven't done those because that's more recent. I think like I have like a soft like decade barrier for like what I consider like old internet stuff. But that's the nice thing about doing this. Eventually, everything becomes history. So I'm sure one day I'll get to start and do an episode about that if I keep it up.
It's like how what's his name, Nostalgia Critic ended up. Now he does recent movies now.
Yeah, you're just a critic
because he ran out of old stuff, so he just does recent things.
I kind of get that. Sometimes it's better to sort of expand the concept than just like run out of things or get bored. You got to keep it interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Jay, for coming on. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Ryan. And
wait, are we done?
Yeah, I'm gonna do the outro.
Okay, great. I'm gonna go play GTA 4 now.
I'm gonna go play the game now.
And that will do it for today's episode of Scandalous Games. If you like what we're doing and want to help the show, subscribe or follow us wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a rating. If you want to learn more, check out our website, scandalousgamespodcast.wordpress.com, where I publish the show notes and the sources for every episode. Our theme music is Occam Seek Me by Seek Knowledge via the Free Music Archive, used under a CC BY NC SA 3.0 US license. If you have a question, comment, or idea for a topic for a future episode, email us at scandalousgamespodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, I'm Kevin Impellizeri.
I'm Kate.
I'm Ryan Weaver.
I'm Jay Brandstetter.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next Scandal. Subscribe to Fat Roll Gaming on YouTube and listen to So We Were Talking About Beast Wars wherever you get your podcasts.